I believe we're ready to go. Good morning and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment of the City of Ottawa under the Planning Act. This video conference is also live streaming on YouTube. With me are my fellow panel members, Stephen Lewis, Terrence Otto, and Martin Vervoort. My name is Fabian Poulin and I will be chairing this hearing today. The procedure for this hearing will be as follows. Listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are the applications we will hear today. For the sake of the efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in a different order. Committee members have reviewed the planning reports and any written submissions in support or in opposition to each of the applications. Today, we'll hear oral submissions from any interested parties. Notice regarding minor variance applications, notwithstanding pre-consultation with city staff, is the responsibility of the applicant to identify all required variances accurately on the application to one, add a new variance or increase the extent of the variance requested. Must be given in accordance with the Planning Act and may require the application to be recirculated for the next hearing date at a cost to the applicant at the prescribed fee. If an applicant amends their plans with no impact to the variances or to reduce the variances requested, recirculation may not be required. As part of the statutory notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign posting. This declaration must be on file today before we can hear the application. Without it, I may have to adjourn the application or administer an oath if necessary. Can the coordinator confirm that we received all statutory declarations?
Mr. Chair, we have not received any today.
I will then administer the oath to all. The committee may ask for a brief presentation of the application followed by questions from members and submissions from the public. Please address your comments to the chair, starting with your name and spelling it if necessary, and your municipal address for the record. The committee limits presentations to 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the chair's discretion. And before we begin, we have two items to address. Does any member present need to declare an interest in any of the applications that are before us today or that are on the agenda of another application? There are no declarations of interest. We also have to adopt the minutes of the last of September the 1st and September the 15th. Do members agree that September 1st minutes are adopted? All those in favor, please raise your hands. September 1st are adopted, and September the 15th minutes. All those in favor of adopting those minutes, please raise your hands. September 15th minutes are adopted. We'll now hear applications scheduled for this hearing. We'll deal firstly with any items that may be adjourned. Is there anyone present wishes to request an adjournment of one of the applications scheduled for this hearing? I believe we have several. First on the list is, well, we can do these four because they're all pertaining to the same agent who is appearing before the Ontario Lands Tribunal today. It's items number 3, 4, 7, and 8. I believe Novatech has to appear before the tribunal. Is there someone representing those 3 applications? It's Novatech, I believe.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
Good morning, Mr. West. You're looking for adjournment for items number 3, 4, 7, and 8?
That's correct. We're looking for an adjournment to November 3rd.
And I believe the planning department is in agreement. Is that correct, Ms. Planning Department? Good morning, Mr. Harrigan, Mr. Gordon.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the planning department is in agreement to the 2 adjournments.
Great. Thank you very much. To that end, I'd like to ask the panel to adjourn these 4 applications, item number 3, item number 4 to November the 3rd, as well as item number 7 and number 8 to November the 3rd. All in favor, please raise your hands. These 4 applications are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Thank you, you too. Now we'll move on to item number 10. Item number 10, I believe, Ms. Zander, are you available? There you are. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members.
You'd like to adjourn your application today?
Yes, I had hoped to have information for you today. My client and his family have dealt with a number of serious health issues this fall, and they've had difficulty retaining a surveyor because everybody's very busy to get the accurate dimensions that staff have requested. So unfortunately, I need to ask for a further adjournment. My client is confident he can have the information by the end of November. So I'm asking for an adjournment. I believe your first December hearing is December the 8th. So if possible to adjourn to that date, please.
Have you hired a surveyor already?
I believe he has hired a surveyor, yes.
Okay. This is the third adjournment request
I know.
on this file.
I appreciate
Okay.
that.
Okay. Planning, I'd like to ask planning for their comments.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the planning department would prefer sine die for an adjournment. This is the third adjournment request. And they do need to provide accurate dimensions of the existing dwelling as well as the proposed new dwelling. And the planning department would strongly recommend that the applicants meet with the planning department because it may be impossible to do a hydrogeological condition, just given that the proposed coach house is over half a kilometer away from the new dwelling.
Okay. I'd like to ask the panel for some, do you have any comments, Ms. Zander?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in response to Mr. Harrigan's suggestion to meet with planning staff, I think that's probably a good idea. Not sure if that would mean an opportunity to meet at the site to actually see the site conditions or how that would play out, but that's probably a good suggestion.
Would that be able to occur prior to our meeting and subsequent to the surveyor being on site?
As much as I would like to bring this forward, I think I can agree with Mr. Harrigan. I think we'd better request this sine die. I'm not confident we can cover all of these tasks in time, so I will change my request with respect and request a sine die adjournment, and we'll get our details together before we request an audience here with the committee again.
Super. Thank you very much. All those in favor of adjourning this application sine die, please raise your hands. Application's adjourned. Thank you, Ms. Zander. I believe you're on number 11 as well.
Yes, that's correct.
And you would like to have this application adjourned as well.
No, sir. This one, we did file the requested information last week. I appreciate it was after the target date of September 1st. September 30th. And so I appreciate staff may not have had an opportunity to review, but we have submitted a revised EIS and a revised severance sketch that we believe addresses the staff comments. So I would prefer to get this on your schedule based on how much time staff feel they need to review, but I'm not seeking a sine die adjournment on this one.
Okay. Mr. Harrigan, any comments?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, we would prefer a November 17th date, not sine die. The 4 weeks there will allow enough time for the department to review the EIS, provide any comments, and hopefully resolve any outstanding issues if they are to occur. And also it allows the Conservation Authority as well too, if they do require that amount of time.
Okay. That's okay with you, Ms. Zander?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Great. I'd like to ask the panel for approval to adjourn this application to November the 17th. All those in favor, please raise your hands. You're adjourned to November 17th. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Now moving on to item number 13. 13. Let's get there. Come on. 13. Mr. Tom, are you available? Mr. Brock Tom.
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Tom.
Hi there.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
I understand you'd like to have this, your application adjourned today.
Yes, please. We've we've yet to receive some information that's been requested by the planning department from our surveyor. Despite many phone calls and emails, I've only just had a detailed conversation with our surveyor yesterday afternoon, and he's committed to having that information to me ASAP. But at this point in time, we don't have it.
Okay. Mr. Gordon, any comments about timing?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. If we have a date that we know we can have that material in advance of, then we'd be happy to set a date, but it really is up to the applicant to let us know that.
Do you have a date, Mr. Tom, that you think you'll be able to get the information?
Yeah, my surveyor has committed to having it to me by end of day today.
Okay. So to that end, would November 3rd or November 17th work better for planning? You need to have some time to review it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it should just be a quick checking that the proper terminology has been used. So in that case, November 3rd would work.
All right. You agree with that, Mr. Tom?
I do, yes.
Okay. I'd like to ask the panel to adjourn this application to November the 3rd. All of those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is adjourned to November the 3rd, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we'll move on to application number 15. Ms. Garbos, are you available? This is having to do with 557 Jenkinson Road. Good morning, Ms. Garbos.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee.
You would like to adjourn your application today?
No, I would not.
Okay. So I guess this application is requested to be adjourned by planning. So therefore, Mr. Harrigan, are you available to make some comments as to why you're looking to
Thank you.
adjourn this
Through you,
application?
Mr. Chair, we're actually not looking for an adjournment. There was, we had met with Ms. Garbos and come to a resolution. We still have some concerns, but we're no longer seeking adjournment. I believe there
Okay.
was a request for an
Yes.
adjournment from a member of the public, but that's all I know about.
Okay. Mr. Lalonde, do you have a comment to make on behalf of?
Yeah, if I may, through the chair, the Conservation Authority is asking for an adjournment. It's come to light within, I guess, since the last meeting that there's been additional activity on the property that was not outlined in the scope of the application, and there's concerns regarding active filling and violations within the subject lands to the PSW. And at this point, we're simply asking for an adjournment to have some time to figure out where the boundaries of that violation may be. Largely, the concern is that there may be violations on the properties to be transferred, and wanting to make sure that the transferee isn't assuming potential impacts and violations from the Conservation Authority as part of this application. We understand that the scope of the committee's ability to hear the application, but that's essentially why we're asking for an adjournment at this time. The notice of violation has gone out as of yesterday, so this is pretty recent that we're dealing with this issue and wanting to at least have some time to sort it out before that the matter is resolved here at the committee.
Okay. I noticed that Mr. Bellinger would like to make a comment. Mr. Bellinger? You're muted, sir.
I just wanted to jump on to be able to comment if needed, but we're not willing to adjourn the meeting any further. This has already been this would be the third time, I believe. So, and the lands that are under discussion are outside of the area that has been disturbed by the current landowner. So we're not willing to adjourn again.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask the panel for their comments. Mr. Otto, any comments?
None for me, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vervoort?
I'd just like to hear from Ms. Garbos on the violation issue.
Ms. Garbos, do you have any information to pass along?
So I believe that information was documented in a letter correspondence submitted by a resident in the area. So they had some photographic documentation. But as my client mentioned, our understanding is that that work has taken place on lands that are not subject to the lot line adjustment, the transfer of the portion of the lands that we're to discuss today.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lewis, any questions or comments?
Yeah, just on the adjournment part, I don't think adjourning's going to solve anything. Let's carry forward, please.
Okay. I'd like to ask the panel to hear this application today. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Application.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
My apologies for interrupting. I think there was another speaker who had requested an adjournment, a resident.
Yes.
Faith Blanquier. Maybe we should hear from her first.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lacquier. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes. We'd like to speak to the adjournment request.
I would rather that you refuse it. I think it could proceed.
So you would like to proceed with the application?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So to that end, again, please raise your hands if you're prepared to proceed with this application. Panel members, all those in favor? We'll hear your application in line. Thank you very much, Ms. Garbos, Mr. Tomlinson, Ms. Blaquier.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we will begin with application number 1. Application number 1 is having to do with 190 Robert Lee Drive. And Andre Leprec, are you available? Andre Leprec. Here we are. Good morning, Mr. Leprec.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I just have to find my notes here. Just a second.
Okay. My name is Andre Lamprecht. I'm the owner and.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, we will require the oath, please.
Absolutely. Just
Thank
one
you.
moment, Mr. Leprec. We need to administer the oath concerning the sign posting on your property. Are you able to take that oath today?
Yes, I am.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir. Please provide us with a brief summary of your application.
Okay. I did send in a short presentation, so I'll run through that. So this is for 190 Robert Lee Drive in Groupe, and the minor variance application is for the lot coverage requirement. You can go to the next slide, please. So the overview, the zoning is V1M Village Residential First Density Zone, as described there. And the bylaw section is V1M maximum lot coverage. The requirement asks for a lot coverage of less than 15%, less than or equal to 15%. And minor variance request is to put a bungalow that will have a lot coverage of 21, not more than 21.1% lot coverage. So that is the description of the minor variance application. If you go to the next slide, please. So there is a site plan. On the left is the solid line. On the left is the edge of Robert Lee Drive, and the dashed box property line shows the boundaries. And as you can see, there's an inner box that shows the various setbacks from the lot lines, the property lines. So all of the setbacks and all of the various zoning requirements for the zone and for this property are we comply with those. The only one is the lot coverage. If you can go to the next slide, please. So that's just elevation drawings showing the planned bungalow. It's a bungalow because we're keeping in mind factors of that's a house for me, and not having a double story would be is for stairs and purposes of mobility and accessibility of the house. If you can go to the next slide, please. So the next 4 slides are just kind of what I've also addressed in the, or described in the cover letter application. I believe the variance is minor because the zoning, the reason for the zoning required, the zoning as it is to preserve a certain character and feel and so on for the neighborhood. And that is achieved not only through lot coverage, but through a lot of other parameters like the building height, the various setbacks. So all of those requirements are being complied with except the lot coverage. Next slide, please. This lot was created by a severance of a previous and existing lot. So, and the purpose of this severance was, as when we went through that process, was to build a small house. From that perspective, this is what was planned and why the lot was severed from the get-go. And again, I just want to state that to be in line with what these lot is intended for, it's for a residential house, small house in this neighborhood, and it is within the style and the general appearance of the other houses in the area. If you can go to the next slide, please. Again, most of the wording here is just talks about the neighborhood and what has been planned. A lot of the houses in the area are bungalows. The houses in the street, not all of them are, but many of them are in that particular area, immediate area. The house is placed, the planned house is placed in the center of the lot, as far away from the boundaries to maintain the spatial character. It's a bungalow. It helps to add to the low profile. Other than a 2-story house on a small lot would be have a different characteristic. So the lot coverage exceedance, I don't think that will really impact the intent or the purpose of the zoning. Next slide, please. The density isn't increased. It's a detached dwelling. In the area diagonally across from the house, there is the back of the Huntley School, which is also making this area open. So locally, although the V1M zone is a much larger area, the immediate surroundings of where the house is diagonally back across to a schoolyard. So the density, the openness is still pretty much preserved. There's nothing really impacted with regards to the lot coverage in terms of the density or the character. And I think there's maybe one more slide. Yeah, this is just kind of a backup slide that shows the original original lot, and part 1 and part 2, how it was severed. Part 1 is the lot where I want to build. So this was mainly for a backup slide. So that concludes the description.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harrigan, I'd like to call on you to have some comments on behalf of the city, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the planning department has expressed minor concerns with this application. We do note that the style in the bungalow is keeping within the character of the neighborhood there, but there are 2-story houses within this area as well too. And increasing the proposed bungalow to 2 stories will allow for 15% lot coverage with the same total gross floor area. So we're not completely satisfied that this minor variance is minor in nature. We do recognize that the general intent of the zoning bylaw and the official plan, which is to keep this village location as rural in characteristics, that intent is being maintained. But our concern is primarily that the increase from 15% to 21.1 is not minor in nature, especially when you can build a 2-story or even a 3-story house that would still fit within the character of the community.
Thank you, Mr. Harrigan. I'd like to ask our conservation partners for comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Conservation Authority has no concerns with the application. We do note, as raised to the previous 7th application, there is a drainage feature along the northern property line. And we would just note that we recommend that it be maintained as a vegetated feature, but it is not, are not requesting that as any condition on the application.
Thank you very much. I see that Amanda Sanford is on this call. Ms. Sanford, are you looking to make a comment?
I have no comments at this time. I'm just here to observe Andre's presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask the panel for their comments, questions, or concerns. Mr. Lewis?
I don't really have a problem with this application. As for a 2-story, I know I find the stairs a little harder every night to go up and every morning to come down. I can understand people not wanting stairs, but I'm satisfied with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Otto, any questions, comments, or concerns?
No, I'm fine with the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vervoort?
I'm fine with the application. I understand the comments from planning, but I think, you know, it's quite often people can comply, but for various reasons, need a minor variance to build what they want. So in this particular case, I think it is, I think it meets the 4 tests, and I'd be in support of the application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vervoort. I'd now like to ask the panel for approval of this application. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. Leprecht. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. On to application number 2, having to do with 2940 Cowell Road. Mr. Brooks, Mr. Glenn Brooks, are you available, sir? Mr. Brooks, are you available?
We're trying.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, good, because we just lost you there for about 30 seconds.
Okay, well, you're back on. Mr. Brooks, I need to administer an oath concerning the sign posting on your property. Are you available to take that oath, sir?
Absolutely.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, as instructed, and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
Yes.
Please proceed and provide us with a brief summary of your application, sir.
These are 2 rural severances on a rural road, and they appear to meet all the requirements as outlined by the planning department and the associated agencies. So I really leave it in the committee's hands to approve this.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to ask planning, Mr. Gordon, are you available to make some comments on behalf of planning?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Subject to the conditions in the report, the planning department has no concerns with the application.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask our conservation partners if you have any questions, comments, or concerns.
Yes, through the chair, no objections from the Conservation Authority. It is noted that the retained lands have presence of the Cranberry Creek PSW. There's some water courses on the property, but none of those features would affect the proposed lots to be created. It's just more of a note that if anything happens on the retained lands, that the owners contact us just to make sure that everything's good.
Thank you, Mr. Lalonde. Mr. Brooks, are you familiar with the conditions that are being requested for this application?
Yes, I am.
Do you agree with all 6 conditions?
There is one condition that I would question, but we're in agreement with, and that condition is the road widening on all roads, on all property facing maintained roads. The widening on Cow Road, we agree with, but in general, we agree with all the conditions.
Okay. Mr. Gordon? Any comments about
yes.
the road widening?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, the department has previously had this matter concerned, and it's been determined through a legal opinion that the road widening should be taken on all lots and on all frontages during a severance application.
Okay. So there you have it, Mr. Brooks. If you want to contest it, you can. It would be at your, I guess, for lack of better words, peril, to move forward without this, because the city has informed us that they will fight any challenge to the road widening.
Yes, we're not going, at this point in time, there is no challenge.
Thank you very much. So to that end, I'd like to ask the panel for their comments. Mr. Otto?
I'm in favor of the application. However, I'm going to state it for the record. I am opposed to the road widening on the retained portion, as we've always done, but I would pass it. I'm not going to put the people in jeopardy, but I still want on a record that I'm opposed to it.
Thank you, Mr. Otto. Mr. Lewis?
I agree with Mr. Otto's comments wholeheartedly. It's Mr. Brooks, I wish you would take this to the next level. We need somebody to do that. Could I talk you into it, the road widening part?
Actually, it's in the process.
Great. Good luck with that. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Vort, any questions or comments?
No, I'm fine with the application subject to the proposed conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the panel to approve this application with all 6 conditions. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. Brooks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We're going to move on to application number 5. This is having to do with 3625 Willhaven Drive. Mr. Brothers, Mr. Kenneth Brothers, are you available, sir? I see that your mic is unmuted, Mr. Brothers. Would you like to join us by camera? There we go. Good morning.
Your chair and committee member.
Good morning. I need to administer the oath concerning the sign posting on your property. Can you take that oath today?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
I do.
Can you please provide us with a brief summary of your application?
Yes, we had sent in a presentation.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. The purpose of our application is to sever the parcel of land pictured in two similar sized parts. My wife and I will build our home on part 2, the green part, and my parents will build a home on part 1. No minor variance is required. So on the left, you see colored in red, and on the right, you see colored in green. And at the bottom of the picture would be the road, Woolhaven Drive in Cumberland.
Next slide, please. So this is our lot development plan, and you can see at the back, there's a tree line, the natural heritage forest feature. And so we made sure that we had a limit of development of the 120 meters that is required. And on part 2, on the right-hand side there's 37.4 meters of rear yard development possible. And then on the left-hand side, the limit of development, there's a 20 meters of rear yard development possible. My in-laws are hoping to do a residential dwelling of approximately 1,700 square feet. And on our side, approximately 2,000 square feet house. And then we have septic bed and spare on each side at the front yard. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so now I'd like to ask Mr. Gordon if he could please make some comments on behalf of the Planning Department.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, the Planning Department has no concerns with the application subject to the conditions within our report.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask our conservation partners for comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, committee members. We support the application. We note that there is a good setback from the natural heritage features. The development envelopes are at least 120 meters from the natural heritage system and the watercourse. We just ask as a condition that the development plan be registered on title just to ensure that it's implemented.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Holm. I'd now like
Excuse me,
to
Mr.
ask-
Chair.
Sir.
Did we do the oath on this one?
Yes, we did.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I'd like to ask if the applicants have reviewed the conditions of this application, if it's to be approved. And
Yes,
are you
we
in
have.
favor? Are you in favor of those
Yes, we agree.
items? Perfect. Thank you. I'd now like to ask the panel for comments. Mr. Lewis, any comments?
No, it looks like a well-planned and thought-out application. I support it. Wish the good luck in the build.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Otto, any questions or comments?
Yeah, just like, I guess, a question for the planners. I thought we had to have a minimum of 25 acres left over on subdivision or in subdividing properties in the rural area. And it doesn't appear that that's the case here. And also on the next application, could you just please explain that, please?
Yes, there's several severance policies for the general rural area. And in this case, I believe it's under the infill outside of settlement area, which allows a lot to be severed from an existing lot, so long as it's basically meets certain criteria, including its proximity to other homes and frontage on a open and maintained paved city road. And we're satisfied that this one does comply. There is no requirement in that policy for the large 10-hectare retained parcel.
Mr. Otto? That good,
I
Mr.
guess
Otto?
that clarifies it to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vervoort, any questions or comments?
No comments or questions or concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application with all 7 conditions. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your applications are approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, committee members and
Thank
Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Now moving on to application number 6. This application is having to do with 1946 Manotick Station Road. Mr. Church, are you available? Mr. Church. Good morning, Mr. Church. And good morning, Ms. Nahal. I need to administer the oath concerning the signposting on this property. Are you able to take that oath today, Mr. Church?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Please proceed with a brief summary of your application, sir.
Okay, we had sent in a presentation, so if it can be put up, that would be great. Wonderful, thank you. So our presentation today is for 1946 Manotick Station Road. Next slide, please. I'll also note with me, there's Brian Casagrande and Tamara Nahal, also of FOTEN. The property owners are also present to listen in and answer any questions that may come up. In terms of the subject property, it's located in the Osgood ward of the city of Ottawa, just to the southwest of the village of Greeley. It's currently surrounded by a variety of agricultural and rural residential uses, as well as a commercial campground use that's located across the road. Next slide, please. In terms of the existing site, it's located on the west side of Manotick Station Road with about 172 meters of frontage and an area of just under 7.5 hectares. The site is currently occupied by a detached dwelling. Next slide, please. So the proposed severance is for splitting the property into two different parcels, one of which would, part two would incorporate the existing detached dwelling. Part one would be a vacant lot on which a new detached dwelling would be constructed. So the two parcels would be roughly equal in size. Of particular note, there's already a registered plan that has been deposited at the land registry office. It seems as though a severance was never executed, but these are already parts, part one and part two, that exist on a 5R plan. Next slide, please. These are just some development stats. So each property would have a frontage of around 86 meters along Manotick Station Road, a depth of roughly 441 meters, and each an area of 3.73 hectares. These are in compliance with the existing zoning for the site. Next slide, please. In terms of the official plan designation, this is designated rural natural features. So rural natural features as well as general rural area policies apply to the site. In terms of how we meet the policies of the official plan, I'll go to the next slide, please. The rural natural features designation does permit a single detached dwelling. So they are permitted where the lot fronts on an existing public road, which is the case, and where a dwelling is permitted in the zoning bylaw, which is also the case. Next slide, please. The official plan also notes the need to prepare an environmental impact statement demonstrating that there will be no negative impacts on natural features. We have submitted an EIS under separate cover as part of this application that identifies a building envelope for the vacant parcel. Next slide, please. So in terms of the general rural area designation, there's policy 19 of section 372 permits limited residential infill to be considered through the severance of lots where certain criteria are met. So number one is that the proposed severance has road frontage on a paved and maintained public road, which is the case. The proposed severance is opposite residential lots with frontage on the same road. The proposed severance is a vacant lot between two existing dwellings that are situated on the same side of the road and are not more than 250 meters apart. And the lots that are created should be of a similar size to the existing surrounding lots, but it must at least be 0.8 hectares in size. Now, we think that it's our opinion that we meet all of these policies. We do note, we have seen the city planning staff report that have noted concerns with a couple of these policies, one of which is that the proposed severance is opposite residential lots with frontage on the same road, as well as the lots created being of similar size to the existing surrounding lots. So I'll quickly speak to those 2 points. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So in terms of the lot sizes, both the retained and the severed lands will be 3.73 hectares. Now, the committee, in their experience, will know that unless you're in a country lot subdivision or in a village, you're not going to find a parcel fabric that is consistent. And as you can see here, it's a little bit all over the place. That being said, we've identified several other parcels that are roughly in terms of the same size. So you'll notice just to the north, 2.65 hectares, 2.78 hectares, 5.53 hectares. Across the road, 3.42 hectares, 4.12 hectares. So these are roughly similar in size, as best as it can be in a rural area of the city. It's important to note the language of the policy as well, that is not particularly strict. It says the lots should be of similar size. We also meet the second part of that, which says that you have to be at least 0.8 hectares in area, which we more than meet. In terms of the other concern that the city had, next slide, please. In terms of being opposite residential lots, the planning staff report noted that these are very strict policies. That being said, the wording doesn't necessarily back that up. The term opposite is not defined in the official plan. So the property as it is, it does front onto, it is located opposite a campground, but it's also located opposite residential lots on the other side of the road. If you go up and down Manotick Station Road, there are other examples of residential properties on either side of the road that front onto Manotick Station Road. So in reading the official plan policies, we are satisfied. We are of the opinion that it is located opposite residential lots. So with that in mind, I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Mr. Harrigan to please comment on behalf of the city.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the planning department does have concerns with this application. Our interpretation of this policy has been consistent as long as it's been in play, and that this is a very, very strict policy that is meant to recognize very specific scenarios where infill is desirable for the existing built form. And as Mr. Church mentioned, most of the time that only really takes place in country lot subdivisions, and that is mainly where this policy is meant to apply. There are certain scenarios outside of that where this policy can apply to it. That is why we have 4 criteria that all have very specific wording to it and requirements, and each one has to be fully satisfied. Now, to that degree, we are satisfied that 2 of the criteria are fully fulfilled. 2 of the other ones, it's unsure. They're not completely contradictory to it, but they don't fulfill it in either. So it's kind of in this gray area. The opposite part, it is just opposite. That's kind of the way that we've interpreted it, directly across from it, just meaning opposite. There is a residential lot from there, but there also is a campground site to it as well too. So that's not fully contradictory, but it's not fully satisfied either. As for the remaining lots, being of a similar size to them, we do agree with Mr. Church that the 3 lots to the north and the 3 lots to this across the street there are of a similar size, but it is the remaining properties to the south that are approximately 0.11 hectares up to 1 hectares, and those are not of a similar size. Neither are the 2 larger parcels or the campground or another commercial property located just north of the campground. So that parcel, the planning department is of the opinion that that criteria is not fully satisfied. So we are expressing some concerns with this application.
Thank you, Mr. Harrigan. I'd now like to ask our conservation partners for comments, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The parcel does have, the property does have a number of environmental constraints on it, hence the designation as a rural natural feature. We have received an environmental impact statement and done an initial review. The statement does identify a developable area that that we accept, and so we don't object to the application, but we do ask that the EIS be completed and this become a condition of approval. Specifically, we'd like the EIS to really clarify what the access is going to be to the building envelope. There's a wetland at the front of the property and an access will need to go through that wetland. We'd like the building envelope to be defined in a way that can be measured and implemented through a development agreement. And then finally, we're asking for a condition that actually indicates on the ground where the building envelope is. The site is fully forested, and there are setbacks to things like butternut. There's a wetland boundary plus a buffer to that boundary. So on the property, it really is not clear where the building envelope would be to anybody. So we're asking that it be delineated by a surveyor, and that would be, we request that would be a second condition of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Mr. Church, are you aware of those 8 conditions, 2 by the South Nation Conservation Authority and the other 6 from the Planning Department? Are you aware of those?
Yes, we are aware of the conditions. We do have concerns with a couple of them. Certainly with respect to, I guess to kind of transition from Mr. Holland's comments, we are fine with continuing to work with South Nation Conservation to delineate the building envelope and complete the EIS to their satisfaction. In terms of their second condition to actually delineate on the ground to guide future development of the severed lot, given that there's going to be a condition asking for a development agreement with the city, as well as the other South Nation Conservation condition asking for the EIS to be completed to their satisfaction, we're not sure how this second condition can be useful or quite frankly enforceable. So that's certainly our comments with respect to that condition. We also had concerns with one of the city's condition. Condition number 6. I'm just pulling it up here to have the exact wording, that the owners provide proof to the satisfaction of the development review manager to be confirmed in writing, that each existing parcel has its own independent storm, sanitary, and water services connected to city infrastructure, and that these services do not cross the proposed severance line. We have concerns with the wording of that because it's speaking to connections to city infrastructure that just don't exist here. This is a privately serviced lot, the existing lot, as well as the vacant lot that will be developed. It will be on private services. So we do have concerns that this we wouldn't be able to meet this condition because there's just no connections.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Church. Mr. Holland, do you have any comments with respect to Mr. Church's comment on number 2?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We do see this as a best practice. We don't think that future landowners are going to be aware of the area that is supposed to be cleared and the area that's supposed to be protected. It isn't a foolproof method, but it does make it clear to them what the intent of the EIS was. We also believe that the site is going to require a survey regardless, and so this can be part of that survey. So we don't see it as a huge onerous task, but just part of the remaining process.
Thank you. Mr. Harrigan, comments on number 6 for Mr. Church.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the specific wording that connected to city infrastructure isn't, I agree that the wording can be a little confusing and can be modified. The sanitary and water is on private services, and this condition would require just proving that the well and septic are on the same lot that the house that they're servicing. the connected city infrastructure, there is a municipal drain that goes through there, which is classified as city infrastructure. And this condition would just ensure that any drainage that is going into that drain isn't crossing a property line, particularly like a sub pump. Again, just making sure that that is being directed into the correct area of the city infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Harrigan. Mr. Church, does that answer your questions with respect to those two conditions?
It does. We'd like to have some sort of confirmation in writing because unfortunately, the way that the condition is worded, I can certainly appreciate what Mr. Harrigan is saying, but the way that the condition is worded it doesn't seem to really take into account that.
Mr. Harrigan, can you omit any of the services, city services that you're alluding to in the condition?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, we would be okay with moving the wording connected to city infrastructure part to it, because it does, as the condition is, the intent is to make sure that they have all of their services on the same lot and they don't cross property bounds. So if we remove the connected to city infrastructure part, the independent storm, sanitary and water, the intent of that would still be maintained.
Great. Is that good for you, Mr. Church?
Yes, Chair, we would be satisfied with that.
Great. Now I'd like to ask the panel for some comments. Mr. Otto, any questions, comments, or concerns?
Basically, just the one that I referred to the last one. So this would be considered infill, so the 25-acre retained parcel doesn't apply in this case, and that's the planning.
Is that right, Mr. Harrigan?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Lewis, any comments, questions, or concerns?
Very simple one. It's probably a simple answer. The property that's behind the 4 lots that face on Manatic Station Road, where's the access to that? Is it the same owner next door? Because we're not creating a landlocked parcel, are we?
Mr. Chair, through you, I'm not aware of who the owner is at the rear of the subject property. It's not the property owners for the application which we're submitting. This severance would have no impact on whether or not that property at the rear has any frontage or not. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to speak to the ownership of that property.
So is it a landlocked parcel right now?
Again, I'm not. I don't know. I would assume there's ownership. Someone owns the property that connects to parcel that has frontage. Unfortunately, given that that property is outside the scope of our application and our work, I'm not aware of who the property owner is.
Mr. Harrigan, can you help with that? I mean, it's already a lot that's already been created, so it's not going to change things. But please
through you,
proceed.
Mr. Chair, if we are talking to the property, I think we are the 3 lots that are north of the proposed severance. The property behind there is a landlocked parcel. It does look like there is a unopened road allowance to the north of that. However, again, as Mr. Church mentioned, this application does not create it as a landlocked parcel. It has no impact on it. It is already a landlocked parcel that has been made, and there's no way to provide access to it through this severance application.
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Revort, any questions, comments, or concerns?
I tend to agree with the applicant that I think the lots are roughly the same size as some of the existing lots in the area. It's never going to be perfect in the rural area like this. You do have lots of varying sizes, but I don't think the size of these lots would be out of character with what's already in the neighborhood. As far as frontage or on the same road, on a paved road, that's fine. And being opposite of a residential area, I note that the severed portion is directly opposite an existing residential house already, and that the retained parcel is halfway opposite an existing residential house. So I think, these applications aren't always perfect, but, certainly I think the general overall intent is met in this particular case. So I would be in favor the application. With respect to condition number 2 of the Conservation Authority, I think it's important that a building envelope be delineated, and that's normally part of the development agreement with the city in any event that it's shown. And with respect to condition number 6 regarding the services, I think, you know, the wording can be changed to refer to private services and drainage for each property so that they are independent, and that's confirmed. So other than that, those are my comments.
Thank you very much. I live in the area, so I see this piece of land every time I drive by it. The residential neighborhoods are opposite to this property, not exactly as Mr. Revort suggested, but pretty darn close. And I would be in support of this application. So to that end, I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application with modifications to the city condition number 6 having to do with city infrastructure as determined by Mr. Harrigan. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. Church. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Now we'll be moving on to application number 9. This application is having to do with 3191 Sarsfield Road. Mr. Mclaren, are you available, sir? Good morning, Ms. Lefleur. You are muted and your camera is off. I see your voice is on, just need to have your camera up and going. Good morning, sir. Mr. Lefleur. Mr. Lefleur, I see that your mic is on. We haven't heard from you yet, but your camera is off. Madam Coordinator, can you assist?
If the owner would like to call in, he can too. I can send him an email right now. Perhaps we can step this down. Oh,
well, there he is. Now you're muted, Mr. Lefleur. You need to unmute. There you are. Good morning.
Can you hear me now?
Good
morning, Chair.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
I would like to administer the oath concerning the sign posting on your property. Can you take that oath today?
Yes, I can.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Can you swear?
I swear.
Thank you very much. Please proceed with a brief summary of your application, sir.
I want to subdivide this property into 2 separate parcels of land and create a new lot for a surplus barn dwelling. In order to do this, I would like the consent of the committee for a conveyance. The land to be severed on a sketch file with the application will have a frontage of approximately 78 meters on Sarsfield Road to a depth of approximately 114 meters and will contain a lot area of 0.655 hectares. This parcel contains 4 buildings and will be known municipality as 3191 Sarsfield Road. The retained land shown on the sketch will have a frontage of 100 meters on Sarsfield Road and to a regular depth of 1,367.15 meters and will contain a lot area of 38.9 hectares. This parcel is vacant and will continue to be used for agriculture purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Lefleur. I would like to now ask Mr. Gordon for some comments on behalf of the city.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, the planning department has no concerns with the application subject to the conditions noted in our report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gordon. May I have some comments from our conservation partners, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We don't have any concerns, or we're not requesting any conditions as well. Just note that the Ottawa Septic System Office has not provided their comments yet. And so we recommend that the applicant confirm with them that there are no issues. Specifically, the septic system needs to be at least 3 meters from the new property line being created, all parts of the septic system. So that's the one concern that they may have. Otherwise, we have no concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Mr. Lafleur, have you reviewed the 5 conditions for this application to be approved? Should this application be approved?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any objections to any?
The only concern I have is the condition 2, since there's no construction proposed for this application. It seems like this condition would not apply. The condition 2 is, I think, just bear with me a second, is for site-specific detailed geotechnical engineering solution to allow the development. The City of Ottawa bears no responsibility, financial or otherwise, to provide solutions to the deficiency, such solutions being the sole responsibility of the homeowner. Since there is no construction proposed for this lot, I don't know how does this apply.
Mr. Gordon.
And also number 3, since we're not on services of any with the city, I didn't know why. I don't know why would this apply as well.
Okay.
Just
sorry. Go ahead if you'd like to finish, Mr. Lafleur. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, that's good. That's the only 2 things I noticed.
Okay. Mr. Gordon, can you enlighten us on these 2 conditions?
Yes. So just to clarify, number 2 isn't a requirement to actually provide a study at this point. It's just a notice on title to let future landowners know that that there could be an issue with clay soils. So it would protect future owners. Let's say if they wanted to redevelop or add an addition or something to the existing structure, that they would have that note. So there's no requirement at this time other than just putting that notice on title. And it wouldn't be required on the retained lands, which are the acreage, because there is no development potential there in the future via that rezoning that is required. As for condition number 3, it's the same issue we just discussed on that previous severance, and that the intent is to ensure that that the services are contained entirely within the residential lot, not crossing lot lines. So if we wanted to remove the connection to the city services, but maintain the intent that that services aren't crossing lot lines, that would be fine.
Okay. Are you? Does that satisfy you, Mr. Lafleur?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So I'd like to ask for comments from the panel. Mr. Vervoort.
Sorry about that. I just had a question for the applicant. So on the sketch, it also shows a right of way beside, I guess to the right of where the house is, a 21.1 meter right of way. I assume that's for access to the field in behind. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the application is for the severance together with the right of way, because I don't think in the notice it specifically refers to the right of way. So I just wanted to clarify. I don't have any problem with that. I just want to clarify that we're granting a right of way over that 21.1 meter strip beside the house for access to the field. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. Other than that, I have no questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis, any questions, comments, concerns?
Looks fine to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Otto?
Looks fine to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the panel to approve this application with the understanding that the condition number 3 will be modified to reflect the city services that are actually required. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. Lafleur. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to application number 12. This application is having to do with 2760 Stagecoach Road. Ms. Zander, are you available?
Good morning. I cut out there. I'm not sure if it's me you were asking for, Mr. Chair.
Yes, it is you.
Thank you.
I
Yes,
need to administer that oath.
I cannot do that, Mr. Chair, but my client from Braydon Developments should be on the call and he can do that.
What is his name?
His name's John, and I'm not sure if he was phoning in or connecting through the live stream here, but hopefully your staff can find him.
I see John.
There he is.
I'm here.
Hi, John. What's your last name, John? Hello, John.
John, you're muted. Okay, do you got me now?
We have you now. What's your last name, John?
John Miller, M-I-L-L-A-R.
Right. I need to administer an oath concerning the signposting on the property. You available to take that oath today?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, as instructed, and was clearly visible and legible during that time. Do you swear?
I do.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Ms. Zander, the floor is yours. Please proceed with a brief summary of your application.
Thank you. I will just speak very briefly, Mr. Chair.
On here, look at it.
And then Gary Mclaren, who's an aggregate expert who's been working on this, has a couple of slides to speak to. But the application before you is to sever a 24.5 acre parcel and retain a almost 70 acre parcel. The retained lands have frontage on Stagecoach Road and the severed lands have frontage on Blanchfield Road. This property is split zoned and split designated, so it's in the rural, general rural and sand and gravel resource designations in your official plan, and it's in the rural and mineral extraction zones in your zoning bylaw. The severed parcel is entirely in the rural zone and designation. And there is some significant woodland mapped on that part of the property. And so there was extensive environmental impact study work done and mineral resource impact assessment work done, and a lot of dialogue with your staff. And I think this is the third or fourth time we're here, but I hope we have everything today. So with your indulgence, Mr. Chair, I'm going to let Gary Mclaren speak. He was part of a site visit with your staff and has some figures, which I hope will help to clarify. Thank you.
Mr. Mclaren, please proceed.
Yep. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Can you spell your last name for us, please?
Mclaren, M-C capital L-A-R-E-N.
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
As the committee's aware, there's been some revisions done to the environmental impact statement and the mineral resource impact assessment for this based on city staff recommendations. I'd like to just speak briefly on the scoping of the issues for those two reports. Initially, the environmental impact concerns, city, we're looking at mapping from the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority, which showed a drainage feature on the eastern part of the severed lands. The second issue was compensation for clearance of about a 1/4 hectare of significant woodland area on the silty sand and gravel deposit, which was the best location for the home on the severed lot. So firstly, to deal with the water feature, we had a site meeting on October the 1st, of which Matthew Haley from the city and Eric Lulon from RVCA were involved. I don't think that's, can I just pull up that sketch that we showed? Yes, that one there, thank you. Probably the other one, but I'll just continue. It was confirmed during the site inspection that the site feature drainage was not clear, was not a water course on the site, but there was some vernal pooling, which is a feature where there's little vegetation and it can be amphibian breeding area. The city and RVCA was concerned with that and wanted to identify that site boundary, as you can see on the PowerPoint that's up there. That's the edge of that vernal pool feature. And we wanted to ensure that there was a setback from that feature where there would be no vegetation disturbance. We now have conditions on staff recommendations that that setback be left in place, that there be very little disturbance of vegetation outside the setback and no disturbance within the setback area, that erosion and control fences will be established to ensure there's no silt running into that area. And also that the vegetation be replaced following the disturbance for the home build as soon as possible after, so we can get that stabilized. All these conditions, again, have been put in the report. Our applicant or purchaser is a small landscaping company in Manotick and is quite aware of these conditions, and I have reason to believe that these avoidance concerns can be adequately and successfully demonstrated. The second piece of the environmental impact statement, like I said, was the quarter hectare of disturbed area. On the high ridge, the vegetation forest area in the EIS was recommended 1-to-1 replacement of the area that had been previously disturbed for the home and for the entrance to the site. We have significant pasture land on the 200-meter retained parcel just to the west there that's naturally rejuvenating adequately with indigenous species that will actually involve a net gain of vegetation in the significant woodland and probably the core woodland area of this severance. So we think that adequately addresses all the EIS issues. In terms of the mineral resource impact statement, the original application, as you can see from this sketch, there's a 200-meter buffer between the severed and retained parcel and the edge of the licensed sand and gravel pit. The official plan typically requires an influence area of about 300 meters. That's typically reduced to 150 where there's no extraction below water and where there's no significant impacts on domestic well water issues. It's worth mentioning that the entire west side of the pit has a 120-meter buffer on it, and this area is also, the west part of the pit is restricted to extraction above water, has previously been high graded. In other words, all the premium sand and gravel above water table has pretty much been removed in that area. So we think that there's certainly adequate setback from the mineral resource area as to the new home to not have a negative impact on the gravel pit. So those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mclaren. Anything further, Ms. Zander?
No, thank you. I think the last little bit of what Mr. Mclaren was speaking to was the other slide, but hopefully the committee members got an opportunity to take in all of that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zander. I'd now like to ask Mr. Gordon for some comments on behalf of planning.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff received a revised EIS midday Friday, and fortunately, the environmental planner was able to review it despite it being after our deadlines. And we are satisfied and have no concerns with the application subject to the conditions within our report.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Ms. Zander if you're in agreement with all 8 conditions on this application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we've reviewed the conditions and I have no concerns.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask the panel for their questions, comments, or concerns. Mr. Otto.
I'm fine with the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis.
Good to see this one finally get put to rest.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Vervoort.
I agree with Mr. Lewis, and I'm fine with the applications. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application with all 8 conditions. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Applications approved, Ms. Zander. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we really appreciate the time your staff took to help us sort this one out. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, staff. Now we'll move on to application number 14, having to do with 2485 8th Line Road. Mr. Fred Zlepnig, are you available, sir? I see your hand raised. Good morning, Mr. Zlepnig.
Good morning, and committee members, good morning.
I need to administer an oath concerning your signposting. Can you take that oath today?
Yes, I can.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, as instructed, and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
Yes, I do.
Please provide a brief summary of your application, sir.
The property is at 2485, 2499 8th Line Road, immediately north of the village of Metcalfe. Our single family residence is located there on approximately 1.2 hectare parcel of land. The balance of the land is in our corporation. Originally, we had applied to do a lot line adjustment to allow about 8.5 hectares to be adjoined to the single family residence, which extended that lot line adjustment back towards the Trans-Canada pipeline easement. It was brought to our attention by Mr. Harrigan and the planning department that part of that lot line adjustment would infringe upon the future zoning designation of the village of Metcalfe boundary. And at our last committee hearing, we agreed to adjourn and readjust the lot line. And that's what the application is before you today. The lot line, basically, it's what has been adjusted is really the depth of the lot line adjustment. It's been reduced from about 725 meters to approximately 555 meters. The sketch was shared with the planning department, and it appears that it will meet the intent of their concern, and the final survey will take into better consideration where that zoning boundary is between the rural lands and the village development lands. So from the change really is, instead of conveying 8.5 hectares to the residential dwelling, the net area to be conveyed is 7.5 hectares, and roughly about 47.69 hectares remain as the retained lands.
Thank you, Mr. Zlepnig. I'd like to ask the planning department, Sean Harrigan, to comment on behalf of the department.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the planning department has no concerns. Our concerns at the previous adjournment have been resolved, and we support this application, subject to the condition contained within the report.
Thank you very much. Mr. Zlepnig, are you familiar with the standard lot line condition that is imposed on this application should it be approved?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair.
And you're in agreement with it?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. I'd like to ask a panel for their questions, comments, or concerns. Mr. Otto?
Okay with the application, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis?
Support.
Mr. Vervoort?
Agree, I think it's fine, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application with one condition, standard lot line adjustment. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. Zlepnig. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We'll move on to application number 15. Application number 15 is having to do with 557 Jenkinson Road. Ms. Garbos, are you available? Good morning again, Ms. Garbos.
Morning, Chair and Committee.
I would need to administer an oath concerning the signposting on the property. Are you available to take that oath?
I am.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
I swear.
Thank you. Please proceed with your brief description of your application today.
Yes, and I have a couple of slides to accompany that. Thank you, Ms. Coordinator. So just to give maybe a brief chronology on this application, as it was alluded to at the start of the meeting, it was adjourned a couple of times. Original submission was in June and it was scheduled to be heard on September 15th. But because the sign went missing, we had to adjourn to provide adequate notice. So we came back before committee on the 6th, but on the request of the City of Ottawa, agreed to adjourn to an adjournment to work through a particular issue. So I'm happy to report that on October 15th, we did meet with the City of Ottawa to resolve that particular issue. On Monday of this week, we submitted a revised sketch to that effect, and here we are today. Next slide. So the property that is subject to the lot line adjustment is 557 Jenkinson Road. It's within Ward 21, Rito Goulburn, and it's located west of Canada, immediately south and fronting onto Jenkinson Road. So just for some context, the gray lands next to the service road there are the existing Stittsville quarry that is owned by Tomlinson, my client, and their lands extend to the western boundary of 557 Jenkinson Road. Next slide. So the purpose of the lot line adjustment is to convey the southern portion of 557 Jenkinson Road to 635 Jenkinson Road, which is immediately adjacent to the west of the site. The purpose of that being to create an additional buffer between the existing quarry operations and the lands to the east. So I will note that the properties have dual designations under the official plan as well as the zoning bylaw. The official plan designations being rural natural features area and significant wetlands, and the zoning being rural countryside and environmental protection subzone 3, which you can see on the sketch on the screen. The other thing worth mentioning is through this lot line adjustment and the consolidation of the lands into Tomlinson's ownership, it will facilitate monitoring on the property, monitoring being of the wetland, both water quality and quantity, water levels. And just a final note that, or to further expand on the discussion we had with the city and their concern. So the northern lot line of the parcel shown in orange was shifted south out of the EP3 zone to satisfy the city's concern of a lot line bisecting a wetland feature. I'll conclude the presentation and leave it open to discussion.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask Mr. Harrigan from the Planning Department for comments, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the Planning Department did originally object to this application because there was a new lot line going through provincially significant wetland, which couldn't be supported under the provincial policy statement. We have had an opportunity to work with Ms. Garbo and her client, the applicant, and they've decided to move the lot line down about 250 meters, so it's no longer fragmenting provincially significant wetlands. As a result, the department is no longer objecting to this application, but we are expressing some concerns with it, mainly that it is fragmenting a natural heritage system, significant woodlands, and significant wildlife habitat. We do believe there is a better alternative, which would reduce the retained parcel to approximately 1 hectare, which would then prevent all fragmentation of all natural features as significant wetlands, natural heritage systems. However, the present option is a better alternative to what was originally proposed.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask the conservation partners for comments, please.
Yeah, if I may, through the chair, the updated, I guess the revised application was not submitted to us, and I just kind of was looking it up during the meeting here. I would agree that the revision is better than the original application based on OP policy, and would confirm or be consistent with Mr. Harrigan's comments. Our original comments at the previous hearing were to look at alternative realignments of the property to better protect against fragmentation of the wetland. But ultimately, I don't think we have an objection to the application as it's presented currently. Notwithstanding my comments earlier, we're still trying to sort out where the violations are on the property, and I think at this point we're just wanting to ensure that Tomlinson isn't receiving a portion of property that may be subject to further action from the Conservation Authority. That was our original request. But when it comes to the actual application, the details submitted, I don't think we have an objection to that application.
Thank you very much. Ms. Garbos, you're familiar with the one condition that's available or is going to be imposed should this application be approved?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, just for the record, I just wanted to highlight, as highlighted in the planning report, further to the revised lot line configuration, that the lands to be retained and conveyed are being amended. So I just want to read this out, that the land to be conveyed is a vacant landlocked parcel measuring 303 meters by, and instead of 1,015 meters, the new number is 750 meters. And instead of 30.5 hectares, the new lot area is 22.6 hectares. And with respect to the retained land, the depth of the is changed from 465 meters to 730 meters, and the lot area has changed from 9.7 hectares to 17.6 hectares.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary Treasurer. Ms. Garbos, do you agree with those comments made by the Secretary Treasurer that modified your application?
Yes, I agree with the measurements you provided.
Thank you very much. Now we have a member of the public that would like to speak to this matter. Faith Blackiah, are you available? I see you're there.
There. Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Could I have my slides, please? Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, PSWs and natural heritage features result in landlocked parcels, no developable land, and no feasible lot line adjustments. This slide was prepared before I received the new sketch, which has the new lot line in the location I predicted. However, the slide that she showed is not in the same, it's not aligning with that other parcel to the east. The yellow is on the rural areas. While the new line may avoid crossing the PSW, staff were saying it's crossing the natural heritage features. There's only about 100-meter access from 635 Jenkinson through the regulatory limits, and the PSWs on the retained parcel landlock the rural pieces. Google Earth shows site alterations in the immediate vicinity of the 635 Jenkinson PSW and a water course that links the quarry land PSWs. The Geo-Ottawa 2008 map has most of the 635 Jenkinson heavily treed, and most was cleared in the 2011 map, indicating Tomlinson removed the natural heritage features. There isn't enough land for development on the access strip or land near the Quonset hut, and there is no access to the remaining rural pieces. Next slide, please. To be expanded is ambiguous. Does it mean Tomlinson's property line or quarry expansion? The quarry license and ME zoning are only part of the area to be expanded. 635 Jenkinson and a large part of the unaddressed parcel to the west are not designated as zone to support a quarry expansion. The quarry boundaries differ in the OP Schedule A and zoning bylaw, and the new OP maintains the existing OP quarry boundaries. Expansion of the quarry is unlikely due to the council refusal on the basis there was 4,000 hectares of lands already licensed. If the quarry can't be expanded, there's no reason to convey the land. Conveying the land to a quarry owner results in risk to the PSWs, both on 557 parcels and the parcels to the east. The next page, please. The next slide. Geo-Ottawa zoning doesn't reflect the results of the Ontario Land Tribunal appeal, which is still in progress, and the sketch and Geo-Ottawa PSW boundaries differ. Could you go to the next slide? And now the next slide. Okay. Staff say the conveyance will create an additional buffer between the existing quarry and adjacent properties. Adjacent lands aren't identified other than 635 Jenkinson, which contains the quarry access and the alterations relating to quarry operations. Staff say the application conflicted with the PPS and now the natural heritage features. There's no ability to use the conveyed parcel or to access and develop the retained parcel, which has landlocked rural pieces, without infringing on the PSW's natural heritage features and related regulatory limits. Staff say the retained land will adhere to the zoning bylaw and OP policy if the conveyance is modified to include all wetlands. The PSW lands are too extensive through the whole property. The zoning bylaw has incorrect boundaries, some of which are under appeal, and the official plan does not support quarry expansion. This application could be refused. If you decide to approve it, I noticed that on some of the other applications that you had required an EIS. There doesn't seem to be one for this. If this should be added as a condition if you do approve it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now I'd like to, would Mr. Bellinger or Ms. Garbos like to comment on Ms. Lacierre's comments?
Perhaps I can begin just to provide some points of clarification and then pass it over to you, Craig, if that's all right.
Yep.
So I just wanted to clarify that as part of this lot line adjustment, under the definitions of both the provincial policy statement and the city's official plan, lot line adjustment does not constitute development or site alteration, and none is contemplated as part of this proposal. It is strictly a lot line adjustment, and I would like to clarify, I believe there was misrepresentation of the landlocked parcel. That one is to be conveyed to the adjacent property at 635 Jenkinson. So in actuality, it will not be landlocked. It will become a portion of that lot, which does have frontage on Jenkinson.
Mr. Bellinger.
Over to you, Craig.
Okay, thank you. So with respect to operations that have occurred on the parcel being severed, we don't know the details of that. We're not the owner of that property. We don't know what communication they've had with regulatory authorities. So we can't really discuss that, and nor is it our business at this meeting. The land that's to be severed off and I guess become part of our property hasn't been impacted by anything that's been going on at the front, nor I guess on the north side of the land. Tomlinson, as Justine has mentioned, does conduct quite a bit of surface water quality monitoring and water levels monitoring, and that occurs monthly in that PSW, and that's a condition of our permits to operate the quarry. The discharge water from the quarry goes through that wetland and then carries forward into the Jock eventually out that way. So essentially what we're doing is we're monitoring what sort of impacts the water that's being discharged on the wetland. So as it stands now, the requirement for us is to gain approval from a landowner in order to basically go on their land and do this work. And we have staff gauges and different things that are set up in there. And that's a requirement by the the Ministry of Environment. So at this stage, if the lot isn't created, that makes it challenging for us to go in there if the landowner decides that we're not allowed to go in there, which is the situation that we were facing. So we negotiated a deal with them to sever the lot and buy that portion and keep it retained as buffer land, but it's also it's for the purpose of monitoring. You can tell by looking at the mapping that most of the land is PSW, which is protected. So there's nothing that from an aggregate standpoint that we could do in there, or expansion, which was something that was contemplated in one of the comments. So I think that's all I really have, unless there's other questions. But it seems pretty clear from our perspective on what the reasoning is for wanting the land. Otherwise, I guess it becomes a question of whether or not we continue to monitor. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask to see if planning has any comments for Ms. Blackier.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, a lot line adjustment is not classified as development for the strict purpose of determining when an environmental impact statement is required. As such, we cannot require an environmental impact statement for that. If the committee wishes to impose that condition, we would be supportive of it, but the purpose of an EIS is to demonstrate no negative impacts to the natural features or their functions. And because there's no activity that is going on there, that's hard to demonstrate. So an EIS would be more of a catalog of what's on the property there and the existing conditions. Lot line adjustments is technically creating a new lot line configuration. So under the provincial policy statement, it is classified as development, and that is something our new official plan, when it does come out, will reflect. But as of right now, our new official plan is not in play. That's the only comments I have regarding that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harrigan. Now I'd like to go on to the panel and see if the panel has any comments, questions, or concerns. Mr. Vervoort.
I'm glad that the application has been amended to address the concerns. I think it's a good solution in this particular case, and I have no concerns with the revised application. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Otto, any questions, comments, or concerns?
No, I think I'm okay with the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lewis, any questions, comments, or concerns?
No, I support the application too. Thanks.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the panel to approve this application with the one lot line adjustment condition. All those in favor, please raise your hands. The application is approved. Ms. Garbos, Mr. Bellinger, thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Blackhair. I don't believe we have any. Pardon?
Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't believe we have any further business today. Am I correct, Madam Coordinator?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Being that there's no further business, I adjourn this meeting. Thank you all very much. Have a great week.
Thank you.